Our next guest, Edmund Meeson III, is an award-winning craft beer brewer who also teaches a class at the University of Central Florida regarding beer and quality brewing for the Rosen College of Hospitality Management. He joins us now. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How did craft beer get started in Florida?
Well, in the U.S. it started with Jimmy Carter in 1978, signed the law that allowed the states to make it legal. It wasn't made legal in Florida until 1989.
And when you say legal, that was because back to Prohibition?
Correct, yeah. It was made illegal during Prohibition, and it was just never changed until then.
Interesting. Now, is there anything unique about Florida? It seems to have taken off this industry very quickly, and it's thriving. Is there anything more about Florida in particular that helps this?
Well, Florida is one of the largest states. We have 14 million plus people. It's summer most of the year, and beer is, and we're also one of the higher beer consuming states per capita.
I don't know whether that's good or bad, but
well, and then we're slow to come to it. The craft beer craze started out on the West Coast in California and Colorado, and has finally come to Florida. So now we're on the steeper end of the learning curve, so to speak.
How did you get involved?
Well, I was at Rollins College, and we had a course where we went to Germany, and I tasted the beer over there. And when I came back to Florida, you couldn't find it. But I went into a shop that sold good beer, but they also sold homebrew supplies, and they said you could make it. And the very first question I remember asking was, is that legal? And it was. And my undergraduate degree is in chemical engineering, so I took to brewing like a duck to water, so I really enjoy it.
Now, you teach a class with quality brewing and fine beer. What are you teaching, and who are your students? I'm very curious.
Well, I would say it's mostly front end of the house, not really so much back end of the house, even though we do touch on some of the brewing process.
Now, what does that mean?
Well, if you think about a brew pub, for example, which is a restaurant that has a brewery, the brewing part, the actual making of the beer, is the back end of the house. The serving, the quality control, the marketing, that kind of stuff is front end of the house. And I teach more of that, and that's what the students learn. Beer is the #1 selling beverage on the planet. There's more water and tea that's served, but you don't get as much money for water and tea. But if you just look at the dollars, that beer is the #1 selling product. And depending on the restaurant's mix of products, a lot of times it's the restaurant's #1 profit item, especially if they have draft beer.
So there's a lot of reasons why the beer industry in general has been such a big economic boom to Florida.
Oh yes, yeah. About $21 billion if you count all the effects of the employment and the money and people, what they spend and so forth.
Now, you said craft brewing is predominantly starts from home brewing.
Yes.
So how is it supplied? I find this confusing because if it's mostly started from home brewing and the breweries are small, is it local? Is it regional? Are there alliances? Is the state too big?
All of the above. No, it's still growing, especially here in Orlando. Tampa is ahead of us. There's about 40 breweries just in the Tampa area, and Orlando is kind of catching up to Tampa. The thing about homebrewing is 95% of all the craft beer brewers start out as homebrewers. It's completely scalable. You can make 1 gallon or you can make 1,000 gallons. The equipment changes a little bit, but the concepts are the same.
Do you think that people talk to each other a lot? It seems there's a lot of communication with the different pockets of beer people around.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of homebrew clubs, which I'm a member of a few in the Central Florida area. There's also the Florida Brewers Guild, and there's beer festivals, and the professionals get together, and it's very common to discuss things over a beer.
I saw even a magazine. I'm sure there must be more, but it was a professional magazine about different aspects of brewing.
Yeah, the national level, there's Brewers Association. They've got a few magazines. On the homebrew side, there's a magazine called Zymergy. And Zymergy is a lot of times the last word in the dictionary, and it means the art and science of making things through fermentation.
Now, how about some of the major national brewers, Anheuser-Busch, Heineken, how are they dealing with a changing market? Is it impacting them?
Oh yeah, the craft beer business is the fastest growing. Different breweries, of the big breweries, are taking different tactics. Some are just buying out other people. Anheuser-Busch was bought out by InBev. Some other breweries. Some breweries get in partnership with smaller breweries, develop it in-house and just make their own. With Anheuser-Busch, they have the Michelob series, so they make their own craft beer.
So there's an element even with the national that they're taking craft beer. I was very surprised when I was reading that beer in general in Florida for 2016 was a $21 billion industry. That's huge. Now you just said that craft beer is on the rise, and how much can you even give a ballpark? What's the economic impact here? Even 20% of that is craft beer, would you say?
Probably about 12% right now, but
but
that's growing.
It's growing very much. And when you're talking about the home brewing aspect, the smaller breweries, is there a job market, a growing job market? Are the jobs significant that are coming along? What kind of jobs? I mean, you do this, you're teaching, but this is sort of a different aspect for you.
Well, I guess I can say I know a number of people have gone through my class that now work in the industry in different ways. A lot of them work in marketing and sales because they understand the product. Some of them actually work in the brewing process as well. Yeah, I mean, Sanford alone has got 3 breweries right now, and there's 2 more coming on board. Just that little town of Sanford is going to have 5 breweries.
I understand that there's a lot of economic ripple too with having the breweries in, not just with jobs related to that, but with restaurants and others. In fact, I'm seeing more advertising for food and beer pairings. I saw craft brew tasting, brewery tours. Are we developing beer tourism?
Yes, I know in Sanford they're wanting to do that directly. We are still way behind a lot of the places. I was just out in Seattle a couple weeks ago, and they have one for the whole state of Washington. It's really well organized. They've got a nice brochure. They have brewery tours that you can take when you're out there, brewery tasting tours. We haven't got to that point yet, but that's on the horizon. How
are we doing in Central Florida? You mentioned that some areas of our state are ahead of the others. How important is it? And it's thriving and growing?
Oh yeah, it's definitely growing. People are becoming more aware of it. I know there's for example, downtown Orlando has 3 breweries. Two of them are right out by the soccer stadium.
So you see this, we should be expecting more and more breweries to keep popping up along the way.
Oh yeah, the demand is there. All the breweries that I know that have opened, I was just looking at the list, there's been only 1 or 2 that have closed in the last decade. Yeah. So the ones that have opened have done well.
They've done very well. In 2015, the state allowed 64-ounce growlers to be sold.
Right.
What's a growler?
Well, I actually saw an original growler up in St. Louis at the Anheuser-Busch Museum up there. Back in the day before Prohibition, it was a bucket, literally a bucket of beer. Because people didn't have refrigerators at home, you could only get it from the saloon. And it had a lid on top. And as the CO2 escaped, it made a growling sound. So that's where that comes from. The standard size in the industry is 64 ounces. I was actually involved with the Florida Brewers Guild to try and get the law changed. We had a bottle bill where you could only sell beer in 8, 12, 16, and 32 ounce containers. We got that changed, and it went from 0 to 32 ounces, and then there was a hole between 32 ounces and a gallon, 128 ounces. So the growler was not allowed, the standard 64 ounce growler, half gallon growler. So what some of the breweries were doing was they were taking 2 32-ounce growlers and taping them together. And then we got that law changed.
So it was very significant to the industry then for that to pass.
Yeah, that's the standard size that almost everybody has. So.
And it's kept that title of a growler, and everyone knows what that means except me.
But not many people actually know, yeah.
Very good. Now, in your opinion, with the industry moving along the way it is and thriving, do you see this as something that can be sustainable and still growing with economic impact for us here?
Oh yeah, they're really, I haven't, even in the more mature markets like Tampa for Florida, more mature for Florida, I haven't seen a lot of consolidation. When you see some consolidation, then you'll know it's getting to be a mature market, but really it's still growing, and I don't know what the upside is, but the craft beer business I mentioned earlier is maybe 12% of the total beer market in Florida, so it has a long way to go. Also, as the population changes, the demographics, when I started doing this in 2006, there were more people that had moved to Florida than natives. Now there's more natives because a lot of the people that have moved here have children. And I've noticed in the population of the undergraduates that are in my classes that they're not interested in their father's beer anymore. They want to try something different. So that demographic has changed. We had a guy from Anheuser-Busch asked, and he gave a demonstration using Budweiser, not Bud Light, but Budweiser. He asked for a show of hands of how many people in this class was the first time they ever had a Budweiser, and more than half the people raised their hands. They're migrating away from the standard beers of their parents' generation.
So that individuality is really playing into it a lot. What do you see as the long-term future for the craft beer industry? What do you think?
Well, it's still growing. Like I said, when you see some consolidation, you'll see it change.
You think we're going to get to 40% of beer sales, or?
Ooh, I'd like to see that. I don't know if we'll ever get there.
Yeah, well, if it keeps coming up with the different kinds of ingredients, it seems like you have a never-ending chance of trying and making new things.
Oh yeah, there's almost an infinite variety, because
Yeah.
you can have spice beers, you can have fruit beers, you can vary the amount of the roasted grain or the different kinds of hops and the amount of the hops. So there's literally an infinite variety you could have.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing the information.
You're welcome, Diane.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you for joining us on Metro Center Outlook.